Spotlight's Yusuf and Yusuf.
Yeah.
2 teenage boys.
Yes. One Jewish, one Arab. They end up sharing a hospital room, and both are waiting for heart transplants.
That setup alone is intense.
It is. And the sources describe their initial interactions. There's tension, obviously, given their backgrounds and the setting.
Understandable.
But that tension gradually gives way to this
Welcome to Witter, Who Has Time to Read, the podcast that brings deep dives for busy minds. You're listening to our Indie Ink Spotlight series, where we lift up bold voices and unsung stories from the world of independent authors. Join our AI hosts, Jane and Dane, as they explore featured works that deserve the mic. From hidden gems to raw revelations, these are the stories that move beneath the mainstream. Who has time to read? You do, with Witter.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're excited today to really dig into the material you shared with us on Rebecca Wolf's novel, Alive and Beating.
Yes, and this is part of our Indie Ink Spotlight series.
That's right, where we get to explore these, bold, emerging voices right from the Witter community.
And Alive and Beating. Well, it definitely fits that description. It's a story that right from the get-go kind of asks us what we're willing to hide, just to belong. Mm-hmm. And then what happens when life reality forces those hidden parts out into the light.
Wow, yeah. That question itself is so compelling. It feels very universal, doesn't it?
It really does.
Okay, so let's start with the author, Rebecca Wolf. The notes you sent mentioned she's a former journalist.
Yeah, and I think you can almost feel that in the writing. There's this groundedness, a sort of realism and eye for detail that feels very much informed by that background. Her fiction and essays, they've appeared in places like Pricity and Tablet, so it suggests she's been, honing her craft and exploring these kinds of complex human stories for a while.
And something else that really jumped out at me from the notes was her volunteer work, tutoring writing for PN America's prison writing program.
Yeah.
That seems so significant. Mm-hmm. Thinking about themes of voice and silence and finding expression, it feels like that must feed into her characters.
I think so too. Absolutely. That connection to finding and maybe amplifying voices that aren't always heard, it feels like it would weave pretty deeply into the characters she creates, especially those struggling to be seen or heard themselves.
Definitely. And the notes also mentioned she lived in Jerusalem as a foreign student before Barnard College.
Crucial context, yeah. Because the city itself, it feels like another character in the book, doesn't it? Clearly drawn from, real lived experience.
Mm-hmm. She lives in New Jersey now with her family. Oh, and the acknowledgement section you included.
Yeah.
That gave such a human glimpse into the indie publishing journey.
Right.
She talks about having a stack of drafts before this one finally emerged.
It's such a reminder, isn't it, that the books we read are often the result of years, just years of work and sticking with it.
Yeah, it really highlights the dedication needed for that indie path.
It does. And she gives this really warm thank you to her family, specifically mentioning her husband Daniel for their support, and others too, like Mike Kelly and Tim Hayes, who shared publishing wisdom.
It paints a picture of a real community effort built on belief in the work.
Exactly.
That's lovely. Well, if anything we talk about today resonates with you, definitely look up more of Rebecca Wolf's writing. Okay, so let's really get into the heart of Alive and Beating. Based on the excerpts, this isn't just one person's story, right?
No, not at all. It's much richer, I think. The structure weaves together multiple perspectives following different characters whose lives intersect or maybe just run parallel in Jerusalem.
An illness seems to be a common thread.
A major one, yes. Often serious illness. And through that, the book really grapples with these intensely human questions. Identity, community pressures, family ties, and just the raw vulnerability of being in a human body.
Especially in a place as layered and, frankly, tense as Jerusalem.
Exactly. It explores all that in this specific context.
It sounds like stepping into the city through many different, very personal windows. Let's talk about some of the people we meet. The material you sent introduces Leah first.
Right, Leah. Her story immediately plunges you into this world of intense pressure within a strict religious community. The excerpts really focus on her struggle with the expectation to find a shidduch,
a traditional marriage mag?
Yes. And at the same time, she's hiding this worsening kidney disease. So the core tension for her is just this agonizing tightrope walk.
Between fitting in, being part of the system, as the notes say.
Right. And this desperate need to live authentically, to be seen for who she really is, illness and everything. It's heart-wrenching.
Her dialysis is obviously central, physically. But the excerpts hint the real drama is also in her family's reactions. Her mother, Hindi, focusing on appearances and prayer.
Yes, maybe almost pushing aside the medical reality sometimes. While her father, Yakov, seems a bit softer, perhaps more accepting, it creates this complex family dynamic around her illness.
And then Benny comes into the picture. Someone outside her world entirely.
Yeah, Benny represents this sort of outside perspective, someone who might challenge her whole way of thinking, maybe offer a glimpse of a different possibility.
Interesting. Okay, then we shift to Yale. The notes describe her living with cystic fibrosis and facing the possibility of a second lung transplant.
That's right. And Yale's story is so deeply colored by her family history. She's the daughter of Holocaust survivors, Manya and Shrulik.
Wow.
And the excerpts suggest how that inherited trauma, that sort of survival guilt from the previous generation, really impacts her own choices about her health, her future, her relationship with her own daughter, Tikva.
That's incredibly powerful, how the past isn't really past.
Exactly. It echoes. You see her searching for these little moments of peace, maybe escape, like after the Y pool, trying to cope with the physical and emotional weight.
And her parents, Manya and Shrulik, how do they factor in?
Well, they respond differently, too. Shrulik, her father, is presented as having some maybe surprisingly non-traditional views, perhaps shaped by his own extreme experiences. Manya, her mother, seems more practical, grounded, but definitely marked by her past, too.
It sounds incredibly layered. And we also meet Hoda, a widow in East Jerusalem.
Yes, Hoda. She's trying to keep her beauty salon afloat. She's supporting her son Khalid through his own difficulties, and she also needs a kidney transplant herself.
So more illness, more pressure.
Definitely. She's navigating pressures from her mother-in-law, Rumi, and just the general dynamics within her community in East Jerusalem. The sources hint at the specific challenges of her situation, but also these unexpected connections she makes. Like there's a hint of a connection with Shrulik, Yael's father, who drives a taxi.
Oh, interesting. Crossing divides.
Exactly. Those kinds of connections across perceived boundaries seem really important to the book's fabric.
And finally, the material highlights Yusuf and Yusuf.
Yeah.
2 teenage boys.
Yes. One Jewish, one Arab. They end up sharing a hospital room, and both are waiting for heart transplants.
That setup alone is intense.
It is. And the sources describe their initial interactions. There's tension, obviously, given their backgrounds and the setting.
Understandable.
But that tension gradually gives way to this really powerful bond. It's forged in that shared vulnerability of facing something so life-threatening together. They even get a nickname, the Yo-Yos.
The yo-yos.
Yeah. Yosef is described as quieter, more introspective. Yusuf starts out more outwardly angry, maybe, longing for his old life, playing basketball. Their journey really shows how that shared human experience can just dismantle barriers society puts up.
It sounds like across all these interwoven lives, the author's voice, as you mentioned, feels really grounded, very human.
Absolutely. She explores these complex relationships, community dynamics, the huge weight of serious illness, all within this vibrant, complicated reality of Jerusalem.
And Jerusalem isn't just a setting, is it? It sounds like it breathes alongside the characters.
Completely. It feels alive, seen through these very different eyes. And the book seems to masterfully show how individual lives are tangled up with the larger cultural, historical, even political context.
But without getting overtly political itself.
Exactly. The focus stays firmly on the shared human stuff.
Yeah.
Illness, family, belonging, searching for peace in the middle of chaos. It's not taking sides, just showing the human cost and connection within that context.
So what really drives the story forward? Is it just the medical need?
That's a huge part of it, the literal need for transplants. But it's also these internal and external pressures. The pressure to conform or to hide parts of yourself you fear won't be accepted.
The search for authenticity you mentioned with Leah.
Yes, that deep human need. Plus, the weight of family obligations, legacies, and then these surprising connections that pop up when you least expect them. It's really about the quiet battles people fight.
Inside themselves and within their communities.
Precisely. The book seems to delve into those interior landscapes with such depth. And what's powerful, based on the excerpts, is that it explores these struggles so fully without necessarily needing to spell out all the outcomes.
Right, the focus is on the journey.
The process, the internal shifts, the relationships, that's what holds you.
Okay, so thinking about those journeys, often in books like this, there are these moments that just crystallize everything. An interaction, maybe, that feels like the emotional anchor. Can you hint at what kind of moment that might be in Alive and Beating without giving anything specific away?
Well, there are these instances where a character is really wrestling with the burden of hiding their illness or some core truth about themselves, and they have this unexpected encounter, maybe a moment of connection with someone who somehow sees past the mask, past the facade they're trying so hard to maintain.
That moment where the performance just drops, even for a second.
Exactly that. It's a moment of profound, almost terrifying vulnerability. It really highlights the huge emotional cost of pretending, of trying to seem whole or normal or acceptable when you feel maybe fundamentally broken or like damaged goods, whether from illness or just not fitting the mold.
And why do those kinds of moments hit so hard? Why do they stick with you?
Because I think they tap into a fear we all kind of recognize, right? Even if our own situation is totally different. It's that fear that if people knew our full truth, the messy bits, the vulnerable parts, we wouldn't be accepted. That resonates. We all navigate these pressures to fit in, to hide things we worry others won't get or will judge. So seeing a character confront that fear or maybe find unexpected acceptance, it's just incredibly moving.
It feels like it speaks to that deep longing we all have to just be seen, truly seen, and accepted anyway.
Flaws and all. Yeah. It's like witnessing this quiet act of courage that the book really brings into focus. It lingers because of that shared human feeling.
Quiet courage. That feels like a really central idea. So shifting focus a bit, zooming out, what's the overall takeaway vibe? How does Alive and Beating feel after you've finished it, after absorbing all these complex lives?
I think it leaves you with this really deep appreciation for human resilience, but maybe not the loud, obvious kind, more the quiet, persistent strength people need just to keep going day after day when things are really hard, physically or emotionally.
And maybe a sense of hope found in unexpected places, those connections you mentioned.
Yes, definitely. A reflection on where connection can bloom, often bridging divides you wouldn't expect. It's maybe just a heightened awareness of the complex inner lives people are leading all around us.
The battles fought beneath the surface.
Exactly. The way the author weaves these lives together creates this incredibly rich tapestry. It's the kind of book that stays with you. Maybe like the warmth of the Jerusalem sun, reminding you of how intricately lives connect, often in hidden ways, and the surprising strength of the human heart in finding connection and authenticity.
It sounds like the kind of book that makes you pause and maybe see the people around you a little differently afterwards.
It really does. It fosters empathy, I think.
Which brings us perfectly to our reflective question for you, the listener, drawn from these themes in Alive and Beating. What truth about yourself feels too vulnerable to share with the world around you?
Just something to sit with, maybe, as you go about your day.
And as we wrap up this Indie Ink Spotlight Deep Dive, we want to put out a personal invitation. If you're an independent or debut author out there, crafting bold, thoughtful stories, we would genuinely love to hear from you.
We really would.
Our Indie Ink Spotlight series was built specifically to amplify voices like yours. Submitting is easy. Just send us an email with the subject line, Community Exchange. The address is witterpodcast@gmail.com.
We truly can't wait to read what you've created.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Alive and Beating by Rebecca Wolf based on the fantastic material you shared with us.
It was a pleasure. See you next time.
Until next time.